Hi there, Randy Green here, video 2 of continuing our contemplative journey, as I've chosen to call it, because I have many topics I want to touch here, which I had comprised into one video to begin with, but here I choose to expand it into different levels of understanding so that you really nail it. And I'm not saying you're going to do my method of doing things. I'm just saying that I might inspire you or coach you in a different direction from where you will figure out your way to work with the material. Because as you remember from the Bailey material, the goal is for all of us to externalize the planetary hierarchy. And what does that mean? Does it mean that we all become masters? No, it means we become soul infused. And that is some of the branches of my work, which I am calling the integration processes of the consciousness units, which I have worked with in my material. And again, for those of you who are just stumbling upon this video or have forgotten it, remember I began studying the Bailey material. I made classes in Denmark teaching the Bailey material. And at the same time, I was also working as a healer at that time. I had my own business was a combination of psychotherapy. I am a certified psychotherapist as well, having done what we call group therapy training, as well as working within that branch that's called existential psychotherapy. You can read Yalom, for instance, Irvin Yalom. He talks about existential therapy, as well as with Kempler, adding these different levels into a specific way of working in group settings while I was while I was being certified as a psychotherapist. And at the same time, I also acknowledged the fact that the psychotherapy alone was never enough because the body mirrors the emotional field. And I knew that first and foremost because I also had read the Bailey material, but I had not read the Bailey material while I was doing my becoming a certified psychotherapist. That came later on, and it came later on because as I was working with people, I was becoming more clairvoyant. Interesting enough. And I was seeing a lot of stuff in people that I did not find to fit into any context of what we could call normal psychotherapy. And I'd always had this ability to have visions, and I have always seen stuff of other worlds. And for a long time, I did, as most people do of my generation, I suppressed it and said, well, it's just fantasy, it's nothing, and whatever. But I remember seeing some pretty scary stuff as a child that didn't fit in any of whatever systems I could come up with. And I had this huge awakening when I was 22, where I had this dream of I was drowning and I was just being soaked into the ocean is a symbol of the astral plane. I was just drowning in that one. And then I had this voice in me pushing me out of my dream and with an electric jolt, literally shouting in my head, see things as they truly are. And from that moment, I got enormous amount of information coming in, which I had no answers to. I couldn't verbalize it. It was just there. And I knew I needed to externalize this knowledge. I needed to work with this knowledge. And I began my quest reading the Bible. And I was just kind of, what a piece of shit. Excuse my language. And it's not because I'm non-religious, because my grandfather was very religious. And I grew up with my grandfather reading me stories from the Bible. And he was very dedicated to that one. And at the same time, he was also, later on, he became a very dedicated Carl Gustav Jung student. And he was doing that while he was fighting his battle with cancer. He was changing his diet. And that changed the dynamic of our family, so to speak, because my grandfather got cancer. So that's kind of the environment I grew up in, the transformation from a religious belief system into a Jungian belief system with veganism and the fight of cancer and trying to do that using alternative methods. And at the same time, having a grandmother that were quite strong in her belief systems, not necessarily a pleasant woman, but she definitely had her opinion about things because her mother was actually one of the first female accountants that were hired in Denmark. So this just to give a little bit of a background of the unusuality of who and what I am. My mom and dad, not unusual whatsoever. So it's within my grandparents' setting, and I were there quite a lot as a child. I have more memories being with my grandparents than actually being with my mom and dad. And I'm not saying that I was happy at my grandparents, because they literally just left me to wander around on my own, similar as they did in my childhood home. So I'm one of the ones that kind of, I grew up with very little mentoring from grown-ups, but had to figure out a lot of stuff on my own. So you can say, oh, that's sad. And yes, that's fucking sad. But at the same time, it also allowed me to produce a different type of brain. It allowed me to produce different ways of seeing the world. I was out in nature. I was sitting under the butterfly tree, and the butterflies were landing on me, and they spoke to me because nobody had told me that that's not possible. I was talking to my cats because nobody told me that's not possible, because I never asked the question, can cats talk to you? And the grown-ups would have said, no, of course not. But I didn't ask that question, because for me it's completely natural that my cats talked to me. My cats nurtured me. They showed me love. We had cats in my childhood home. They slept with me. They were close to me. They licked me in my face when I was sad. They crawled up on my lap when I was sad. They warmed my heart. They showed me that I was loved. My cats showed me I was loved. And I kind of looked at my parents, because I'm an old soul. So I looked at my parents and I just thought, I'm not going to get anything from them. So I was just very early on, very observant that, I had to do things differently. My father was taking care of my big sister because she needed him more than I did. He did a lot of stuff with her, which of course have given me some psychological traits of abandonment and not being the chosen one and not being the one that my parents chose and all these kind of things. And I was left to my sister wandered off, my dad wandered off, and I was left behind with my mom and her depression and whatever she was suffering from. So of course I got psychological traits that goes with that one. And I worked my way through that as I was doing my education as a psychotherapist. We also did group therapy. I did supervision. I did a lot of personal therapy. And I was working through this in my own manner, because I knew quickly that what I was taught at school was okay, but it was not sufficient for my structure. I kind of just knew that. So this is, again, where other people are lucky to have this inner compass, that are telling you what is right and what's wrong, that are telling you that this world is for you and this world is not for you. As a child, I remember staring out the window and thinking, when can I leave this home? Because this is not my home. What am I doing here? I just need to grow up. I need to reach the age of 30. Then I can begin what I'm here to do. I had very early on this feeling of being on some kind of mission. And of course, when I was 28, I got completely hijacked into the ovary need to continue my biological traits, and became a mom and all this kind of thing. So I never got this huge 30-year release that I was supposed to have. And that came back later on, after I was done being a mom. That came back in full force in 2016, where I literally had to catch up on 20 years work. So this is also why I've been so busy. So I was doing the mom thing, I was doing the best I could, but that's not where I want to go. But that halted me tremendously in what I was here to do. And I know it deliberately, it was put in that way. And I am in all ways and forms grateful for my daughter, because she has made me a better human. But with that said, that was not what I was supposed to do. So in that whole being a mother as well, I was also having my own business, and I was doing this. I was a lone mom because, being in a marriage was not really in alignment with how I wanted to approach things, because he was very, let's do the normal way, and I was already there beginning to work my way out of normality, whatever that meant, and took my daughter with me. I always made her within the normal setting, because that's what she preferred. So I respected her karma and what she was here to do, always looking at this is what she needs to become, and she does not need to be involved in whatever I am doing, separating these two things. and literally looking at what she needed. I'm talking about that much, and giving her what she needed to become who she was to become, always knowing eventually she will grow into a different mindset, but right now she needs to do different phases to undo her previous karma and whatever she brought with her and whatever her function within this world is. And this is how we should look at our children. And that is technically also what is put in the Bailey material in the education of a new age. This is how you should approach your children. You need to know what they are and what they are carrying with them to be able to give them the correct mentoring so that they can become externalized souls inside this reality. And I'm deliberately putting it that way, again, using the Bailey context. So again, with this whole understanding of me already being set aside, as it's called in the old Hebrew Bible, the prophets were always set aside from birth to do something else outside the normality of society. That's me as well. My whole life I have been set aside, which of course has been difficult as well, but learned a lot. It had created already cognitive dissonance between being something and then trying to be something. The whole trying to become part of the normality, which did work well, but I was quickly, I remember in 2000, the beginning of 2000, I got this high career job and I was earning well and I was doing well, and everybody was kind of, oh, you're fucking good at this and whatever. I was being a recruiter and I was using my therapeutic understanding and talking, interviewing people, thousands of people over the course of time. I was working there, and I was good at plotting people into finding the right job and how they fitted in. And because I could see them clairvoyantly, I quickly nailed their psychological structure, not using the 7 rays, but just knowing, oh, this is that type of person that kind of enjoys that. And the more I was doing the whole kind of reading resumes and doing the interviews and matching them up with a specific type of jobs and what they had interest for, that taught me a lot about people inside this reality and how they are programmed to fit specific tasks, to put it in a different way. So that was also very fruitful for me. But at the end of the day, I didn't feel I was doing what I was supposed to. And that's where I spiraled out into having my own business, doing psychotherapy, using my clairvoyant abilities, which I used, and then added it up with healing. And that's where I wanted to go, eventually also talking a little bit more about what healing is and what healing can become. So this is where I'm finishing off some things, but also revealing a little bit about some personal information, because in all of this, it's easy just to talk from the Bailey material, and then you just think I'm a parrot that talks about this and I have no personal experiences. So I decided with this is where I actually should begin to reveal some of the crazy life experiences I have had, because I have thousands. So it's not that this is me studying some material and then just parroting it off as a little parrot, knowing, oh, I studied this, so this is what it means. It's actually been, I have lived my life figuring out what this planet is, figuring out what humanity is. And I've gone through different jobs and careers and levels of my life, fitting into the base program and working my way out of that one in different ways and in different forms, some of them lesser nice than others, and what I've experienced, what my personality has done in businesses. For instance, one of the things I usually joke about is that as I grew more and more into who I actually am, as I was at these businesses, if there was anything rotten in the company, I had this tendency to bring it up to the surface. If the boss was a jerk, well, then for some odd reason, first I had to work with that, whether it was a secretary or whatever it was, because I've had different jobs, and then it was just kind of, well, then I was dealing with that dinosaur kind of thing, but as a private secretary, but at the same time, the co-workers were coming to me and they needed my help, and I was good to talk to, and they felt confident, and I was the secretary, so they kind of hoped that I might pass on the words and the whole me saying, well, you should go directly to him and tell you how you feel, because that's not my job. I'm not here as an intermediary between him and you and telling this and that and whatever. And of course, that did not have a nice outcome for me either, because the load became too much. Plus, this particular dinosaur, he was difficult to handle. I actually got the credit for being the secretary that lasted the longest time. I stayed there for 2 years. I was the secretary that stayed the longest with that boss. So that tells me something. And to be completely honest, what I did was, aside from being good at profiling him and knowing what he needed, and that way it just kind of played the game, so to speak. But when he was a little bit obsessive, and if he became unpleasant in a specific way where his dinosaur really lurked through, and I would say lizard, well, then I would start crying. And then he would shift modality, because then it was just literally I think I was tapping into some of his mother issues. He grew up with his mother alone. Anyways, just saying. So there are always information behind whatever. So this is again psychodynamics between humans and how we survive the environment we're part of. But that taught me a lot as well. That was the last job I had. That's where I kind of said, well, if this is how my Pluto in first house combined with Uranus in Virgo, personal information there in my first house. Well, because that's kind of, you have Pluto that drags things up from the underworld, and it was in Virgo, so that means transformation from its lower level to its purified level, and at the same time having Uranus playing in there, and the combination between a triangle between Uranus and Saturn and Neptune. Well, then you have my life in a nutshell, and what that actually means. It's a fucking hard learning lessons to master the energies of Uranus and Neptune through the lenses of Saturn with Pluto in your first house. So that kind of tells you this is what you will encounter, purification processes. So that has been a headline in my life, the whole kind of always being plunged into the deepest secret level of our society and all of the evilness that is there, to put it up to the surface and then dismantle things. So, and the joke was, which I'm kind of, is that I have several companies where I was very, very appreciated. But it kind of appeared whenever I left, because I always stayed as long as possible, and people were then slowly, because of the conversations and me drawing things to the surface, and it was not that they were not aware of that it was there. It was just, it had not been verbalized. It had not been put into word. It had not been nailed down. It was something everybody subconsciously knew this is wrong, but they were never saying anything against this. And then I come in with my sword and I put words to what's going on, put words to the dynamics. And also talking to the bosses and saying, hey, there is this dynamic and this does not work. This is not working correctly. And then unraveling stuff that was supposed to be what with creating a crisis, which led to, for some, it literally led to leaving the job and said, finally, this is what I needed. I needed someone to point it out for me, that this is actually what's going on. I haven't been able to nail it, and happily moving on, and bosses being removed from their positions and all sorts of stuff. So I'm kind of, don't hire me unless you want your company to undergo a complete crisis, from where that can be turned into something productive that can lead to a higher level of purity, that can lead to a higher level of understanding of who and what we are and what we're actually doing here as humans, being better towards each other and actually trying to create good together. A business should be something where we all prosper, where we all strive for this unanimous goal and not using all sorts of diminishing methods. I also have what you could call a certificate in human resource management, as well as development of business cultures. So that was not where I wanted to go, but just saying, so all of this I took with me when I began doing the healing work as well. So you can see this was kind of, I had this beautiful combination, which Bailey also advocates for. When you become a healer, I was a psychotherapist. I had a lot of business experience with me. I knew management. I knew cultural settings. I had the human resource management. I had done a lot of recruiting interviews, learning the personality structures of humans and where they fitted in job-wise, including the whole psychological structure, and then adding in clairvoyance, sight, and the healing abilities. And this, with the healing, I will touch ground with that when I begin talking about the esoteric healing book and some of the ideas of what healing actually is in the Bailey material, using that as a context and adding in my personal experiences. But because of the Bailey material, that is for where I took my basis. I used that material to say, well, a healer or anyone who's working with people should know everything there is to know about humans. And that's where I began working with humans from that level of understanding. And because I had already that in order, I had already experienced it, I had worked with it in different levels. And because of the time and what happened in 2011 and 13, and we were entering to the 2014 until 2021 period, I was shifted out of whatever that was possible for me to do in the period of peace, because our century has already gone through different levels. The first 21 years were built up first of 7 years of I would say reconciliation. If I look back at what was possible, 7 years of reconciliation from 2000 until 2007. And you can still say, well, we had the 9/11, all these kind of things. Well, reconciliation does not mean peace. It means that you are coming out of a war and you are still battling each other on different levels of reality, typically not inside ours, but the different kingdoms in their own realms. This is where I'm talking from, as always. So there was this whole settlement going on. And then we had, from 2007 until 14, we had peace. And I remember that was where I began my business, my own company, and healer and clairvoyance, and I was working with divas. I was working with all of these gorgeous, loving beings out in nature, and it was a very peaceful time. And then we enter into 2014, where I wrote The Souls of Humanity, and then I came in contact with the military projects of America. And before I knew of it, in 2016, the trumpet was called for my call, and then we were just going into complete, at least I was, war from 2017 and onward. And the interesting thing is, I saw a lecture the other day that referred to the true neutron stars that collapsed and merged into a gigantic black hole on August 17th, 2007, and created a humongous, what they call, gravitational wave. I can explain a little bit more about gravity later on, how I actually see gravity, or you could call it a humongous decay rate wave that were in the gamma band. So that would be purple ray gamma band, 7th-dimensional level, that were infused with whatever was left of these true neutron stars that just completely plunged into a black hole where there's no vital force, no code system, no nothing left. There's still a lot of energy in the mass, what is left, but it's now complete decay energy, and that means it contracts. That's technically what gravity is. It's contracting energy. Whereas if you have protons and electrons, they are expansive energies. So this is, again, a little bit a way of looking at things. It leads evolution. It leads to some sort of progression, whether evolution can also go backwards, but it allows for some sort of expansion in time and space, in space-time, somehow, somewhere, and outside space-time, to put it that way, but that's another type of dynamic. Whereas gravity is not just holding us to our planet, and that is some of the sciences I will go into later, but from my perspective, we are held on the planet due to our magnetic field, our dipolar field, that is in alignment through our gyrostatic features we have in our organic vessel. all our atoms are aligning ourselves with the magnetic field of the area we're living in, all depending on where on the planet we're living. So for me, it has nothing to do with gravity. But gravity, since it is a weak force, let me do the explanation here. Gravity is a force, but it's not what's keeping us on the planet. That's the magnetic field. But gravity as we have it now, because we're still a planet that is expanding, so to speak, it has not reached its spherical limitations. So gravity is still just a weak force. It's there, it creates entropy, it contracts things, it pulls things back in time, and it keeps things at a status quo level, so to speak. That's what gravity technically is in its dynamics. But as the planet itself goes to its limits of progression or evolution, then gravity becomes stronger. And as gravity becomes stronger, then the protons will cease to reproduce themselves. The proton field will cease to exist. Eventually, the electron field will cease to exist, and then what's be left will be the neutron field. And those of you studying a little bit more about the electrons and the neutrons, get rid of that whole old ideas of atoms being combined the way they are. They are technically unified in fields, to put it that way. They are expressions of electron fields, expressions of proton fields, expressions of neutron fields. And the neutron field is the last one that goes into the quantum field, and that's the last part that remains of any living system. The other ones go into complete decay and ceases to exist. And then the neutron field is the last one that remains, and that is where gravity will take over and begin to contract and decompose and send things into decay. So that's what the neutron level technically is. That's where gravity becomes strong and goes into what we could call a different spectrum of energies where life can no longer exist. So that's technically what that is. That will be my explanation of it. And that's also when we talk about propulsion systems that are using gravity waves and these kind of things. I would say that's incorrect. I would say they're using magnetic waves and they're traveling in time and not in space, which I will explain in the other video I made on the 11th, where I talk a bit about shifting from spatial awareness or perception into temporal perception if we are to understand the other races that are existing here. So to finish off the book, Education in a New Age, when that was written, I think it's actually written after the end of the Second World War. You can look it up. He mentioned it himself. It doesn't matter much. I think it is at the end of the Second World War. He is prophesying that within the next 150 years, humanity will then have gone so far in their externalization of the hierarchy, which means the hierarchy will undergo this complete being dismantled or being complete transparent and being actively present on earth, but not through the masters. As is also mentioned, these masters are from other realities and other levels of the human hierarchy, earlier civilizations, and therefore they cannot work on or walk on Earth because their energies will have profound effects on our molecular structure as we are now. So therefore, the only way to integrate the soul kingdom into humanity is through this externalization of humans becoming the masters. Not that we are to become avatars and all these kind of things, but that's the idea, that we become soul-infused humans. And to get to that point, there are different levels of structures that needs to be built. And that is part of where we transform the energies of the previous solar system and what went wrong there, and into this solar system where we are working under the second ray in a setting that is controlled by the fourth ray, where we are to undo the effects of the Atlantean six-ray Atlanteism, where you are, or the astralism, where you are all run by desire energies, and whatever you are creating the desire or the sexual energies to draw to you what you want to manifest, and in that you're technically creating a lot of distortion, offspring in your emotional field, and by that affecting the collective field of humanity. So this is the process that we are in. But we are not to lift ourselves up to the mental field before we have done the whole integration of our personality that are developed between the dynamics between the 6th ray dedication, sexual energy, desire structure into the 4th ray understanding of contemplation and how to work correctly with energy and consciousness in a way that creates cognitive dissonance, from where you can create on your own a dynamic from where you deliver that frustration you need to develop your energies. Because what are the frustration, if it's worked with correctly? That is a way of transforming energy. You're not transforming energy when you're status quo. You need something that comes in and stirs up your comfort zone before you go into some sort of transformational modality. So this is the understanding of the 4th ray, and you can choose to create it on your own by taking on challenges from where you will be in more or less control of this, or you can do it by asking questions, or you can do it by plunging yourself into different challenges that are all depending on where you are on the evolutionary scheme, will develop different levels of your ability to master levels of whoever and whatever you are, creating a personality you have created and not the one your parents created for you. That's kind of where we can put that one. So the psychological work out of our childhood settings and who we thought we were supposed to be in our childhood home and developing into a mature personality, that's the psychological work within reality. And from then on, it goes into the other levels of reality where we begin creating what you could call a more expanded personality. And that personality is supposed to become to a level where it will become the cup, as is typical. You can also say the cup is also the etheric field, once the 4 cosmic ethers are developed in a specific way, so they can house the energies of the soul. And this is what in the education of a new age is called the merging of 2 forms of light, the light of the soul and the light of the etheric field, where the etheric field transform into golden energy and the energy system or the light of the soul transform into white energy. And these two are to merge together in the chakra system, which I showed in some of my earlier teachings, where you kind of have the perimeter of the chakra system. Once you're done with it, before it transforms into the higher 5 fields, which it is transforming itself into, it is chipping off 7 chakras and transform itself into 5 chakras that are then able to work with the mental field, from where you can begin building the structures that are needed to compose and activate the 21 chakras that are, most of them are, 7 of them are situated in the brain, and 7 of them are situated around your heart field, and 7 of them are connected to the root, but in a different way that is not easy to detect in that way. Some of them are not in the body yet, they are technically outside and you need to draw them in. And some of these 21 chakras, for those of you who went back with me and did the template readings, you will see they are bound in the 4th dimension in the sealing off. These chakra levels are bound in sealing off prohibiting technologies. And these are some of the template readings I used to do when in 2013 and 14, I was allowed to work with the mapping of how we had been sealed off and that capacity had been taken from us. That's technically where you have your higher awareness, or the beginning of the soul, that goes with these 21 minor chakras. But they are they are put in the 4th and 5th dimension. So this is when you talk about the 7th chakra that's inside this reality, transforming the energy so you can produce the right etheric field, from where you can then begin to activate the 21 chakras that goes with the construction of the soul, which will then go into the 49 chakras that will come later on, that will be built in mental and etheric matter, from where you can begin to connect to that level of understanding. You typically connect to the highest level of you, or Shambhala. You're going to have the spirit and the soul and the physical form going with these 3 different levels of understanding. So, and this again, if we do with this, if you do succeed to activate the 49 chakras, you will cease to be on this planet. So this is part of the transfiguration, because if they begin to spin in their correct dimensional type of energy, which bridges into the 6th dimension, you will do the transfiguration, because you will then, it will create so much amount of energy that your physical form will completely cease to exist. So that's part of that one. So what we are to aim for are the purification and the cleansing of the 7 chakras so they can reorganize themselves into 5 major chakras. I'm talking about that in my material. And then we are, with these 5 major chakras, are to build that using the code sheets and the etheric field. So we build the right construction of our molecular level from where we will be able to begin to activate the 21 chakras, from where we can work in mental energy. And these mental energies are the first 4 layers that will activate our brain in a new way and create new types of enzymes in our brain because of the 7 chakras that will activate. We have the first 3 ones we have built using the 7 chakras. We have the Alta Maya, and we have the quote-unquote crown and the Ajna chakra. From there, we will, that understanding and the correct use of our heart energy, and the root is technically our molecular physical state, and here we're not using that much other than beginning to pulling in the correct type of energy from whatever racial grid we technically belong to, and that's the work with the timelines, and that's the work with the expansion of the heart field into a higher level of understanding of other realities and previous solar system and other races, and going beyond the limitations of the human awareness within the planetary setting. That is technically the 21 chakras, and that's a long process. And the 5 levels I have put in my material are the 5 chakras I show there, including the Hara quadrant, which you begin to work with to get rid of the different insectoid or avian or reptoid and mammal type of genetics that are inserted there, which I talk about in the Souls of Humanity as well. These are the different composition of genetics that are technically blocking your chakra system, as well as being part of the seals that are put upon you that allows different races to use your template in whatever ways and forms they see fit. And this is a problem with the old world order or the planetary hierarchy, how they technically perceive humanity. And this is what I've been discussing. And when I talk about the Balen material, this is a small portion of humanity that we're trying to assist humanity to get out of the jam that they were in. But then there's the rest of the planetary hierarchy that are not interested in that way, because they have got businesses going here, they've got trade systems going here, they have got their own stuff going here. So this is the political battle that is also part of the planetary hierarchy. So it's not just that the planetary hierarchy are the only ones that are there and everything is good and fine on that quote-unquote soul level or the 5th kingdom. Not at all. It's a complex planetary and solar and stellar council debate system where everything has to be debated and agreed on, and compromises and what to do and what not to do. And yeah, we want to do this, but we can't do this because then they are saying they need to do this because they have the right, that they have put their genetics in humans, they have these contracts, they have these going back to Atlantis, and therefore they are allowed, they have commission to complete whatever projects that got going on here. And then the other ones that were part of the original elder races that were taken over by the hijackers, and all of these kind of things I discussed and shown all of this in my material. So just, even though I do the beta material here, it's not that you are to, again, put your arms in the air and say, oh, the planetary hierarchy, woo, woo, woo. They are here to do the best for humanity, because they are doing the best for humanity within an extremely complex political system where a lot of voices have to be heard and where a lot of compromises have to be done. And these are not always in the benefit of humans. And remember, when we talk about the kingdom of souls, they are existing in the 4th and 5th dimension, and therefore not in our type of organic form, and they don't see the organic vessel as we are living it as something that is tremendously important, because it is an engineered vessel that is produced to transform energies. And if whatever is in there, the template or the soul or whatever is built, well, that's what matters. It's never the matter that matters, because that's the previous solar system, and that should have been done with a long time ago. But since we're still having some of the older races that are still here, well, then it is prolonged and it is becoming a difficult matter. In the book Education in a New Age, as I began, the Tibetan prophesied that humanity, that was what they were working for. They were seeding the thought form, and they were seeding it in a way saying this is going to happen, so that people that work with them in the sixth ray, which were the prominent one 100 years ago, then that would be, people would work towards that, thinking this is what's going to happen, so we will create and act as if it were to happen, fake it until you make it. So they put that one in. And the idea was that in the future, in our time, humanity, overall speaking, our schools would be focused on the building of the antakarana, which is the link between the soul and us. And the processes of schooling of children, as well as parenting, would be the ability to externalize the fifth kingdom into our reality, of literally integrating the soul level into the human, working with the correct understanding of karma, the correct understanding of energy, the correct understanding of what we call dharma, which is karma is what you bring with you from your previous lifetimes. Dharma is the path that is created of your karma, just so you know it. So this is where, again, with the Hindu terminology, you're born with your karma, but your life defines your dharma, the path you are to walk. So you get out of your karma by following what has been put in front of you with your dharma or your path of this life. And we can say, well, that has clearly not happened. I know there are smaller schools here and there, but it's not on a global scale. Our society is a completely different way now. So therefore you can say, well, what's the point of reading these books if they didn't lead to anything? They are steps on a path of understanding. And this is why we need to do the comparative spirituality, as well as comparative psychology and comparative science, where we understand the history of the systems we're working within, but also the ability to lift it to its next level, to say this is what has gone before us, which is the past, whatever level of the past we are talking about. And this has been part of creating who and what we are. It has been part of creating certain thought forms and ideologies and teaching systems. And we are to look at these teaching systems and ideologies and paradigms and say, okay, what can we use from there, and what fits the current age that we are in, and how can we apply it to the age that we are in? Not what we necessarily want it to be, but what is the correct dynamic between the reality we have and what is wanted. So again, and this is where you say, well, what is wanted? Who decides what's wanted? And that's where, when you had the Bailey material, it was easy, because that answer was then given into the hands of the hierarchy, the planetary hierarchy in the 7-year cycle and their 100-year symposium. They were deciding what was to happen for humanity. But with the things that have changed in our time, we can say that there has been some sort of externalization of the hierarchy, because now that is up to us. There are not per se higher levels that are deciding for us. There still is, but the division between who we are and the planetary councils and what's going on there, due to the events of the last 50 years, have grown in unfortunate ways. Different measurements have to be done, different stands have to be taken, and different ways of working with our reality has to be acknowledged, that are within, and it has always been within the understanding. Again, if you do the Bailey material, you had 3 groups of humans. You had the ones that had got a huge portion of consciousness units from the Great White Brotherhood. You had the one that got smaller levels of it, and you had the ones that put more or less got absolutely nothing more than what is necessary to keep a physical body functioning. And this is, again, because of what is called the division of the cosmic evil, that this was divided amongst the different groups of humans on our planet. So they had different tasks and different abilities to transform the energy in a complex and diversified way, where not everybody were having the same abilities, but some had to work harder than others. You can say they were already imbued with a higher level of karma and lesser of the second ray type of consciousness units, and some of them had a higher level of the second ray consciousness units because they had lesser to develop, they had lesser to transform, but they were also carrier of a higher purity rate, which would then set a standard that would affect the collective. So these were the carriers, or the front runners, or the first ones to go, or the first of the many to carry the burden of the many, which we are seeing symbolized in the story of Christ that sacrificed himself for the majority of humanity, taking their sin onto his shoulders, which is a perversion of the original idea. But then you had the middle group, and then you had the laggards. And in where we are now, we must say the laggards will probably not make it. So the focus should be on the middle group and how we are to externalize this understanding and what we are to embark on to achieve that goal. That means that we will integrate our consciousness units from our template level. That is my wording in the old saying, integrating your soul level into your physical form and developing your personality in a direction that encompasses the group orientation, that you are doing this for the highest good of the many. You are doing this so we can transform the unfortunate past of the previous solar system, and that one get rid of whatever was seated there in past Earths and past levels of our racial grid, so that the majority can move on, and that's the middle group, in an environment where we will achieve more or less the goals that were set for our solar system before we will all do the great transition and uplifting into the universes around us. So we at least can say we have achieved the goal of transforming the previous solar system, shutting the door to that evil, not repeating the mistakes of the past, of which many of us did, and at the same time has managed to push forward the 12 lineages in a direction that will lead more into the elevation processes than what was the possibility rate of the previous solar system. We literally ended up in a very, very, very severe state with the 12 lineages in the previous solar system. There was very, very few left of the original lineages. More have been made inside this reality in this solar system. So you can say there is a 40% success rate of the project that was going on here. But this project is also reaching its finalization. And this is where we need to cut the losses, but at the same time also make profound strategies that will allow on a broad scale as many as the middle group to move on, because the highest group, they will move on their own. So how do we teach the middle group to do this? And I know from what I have said over time, I am taking a different turn. I have the last 4 years, due to the war setting we have been in, the 7 years of war or conflict, I have been completely in my warrior modality, because that was what was necessary there. But with 2021, we are entering into 7 years of what's called reconciliation. That does not mean the war is over or the conflict is over, on the contrary, but there will be, overall speaking, an air or a mentality to try and find solutions, so that we at least can say a larger portion of the projects that we're supposed to accomplish with the solar system will be reached. And if we accomplish this, then we will have from 2028 until 2035, we will then have 7 years of peace. But after that, we will in 2035 and the next 7 years that comes after that until 2042, we will have 7 years of conflict. As you know, from 100 years ago, we had the Second World War began in 1935 and lasted until 1942. And that 100-year cycle will be repeated. So what can we use the next 14 years for? First 7 years of reconciliation until 2028. where we will work the best way we can, and then we will have 7 years of peace if we do it well and the counterforces don't get the upper hand, and then we will foresee the crisis. So the goal will be to minimize that crisis that is in alignment with the 100-year cycle of the Second World War. We have minimized the Spanish flu that ran from 1980 until 1921. We have had the corona version of it, and we have minimized that one. The casualties then were 50 million people. This time it has been barely 3 million, and I know it's still losses, and it is unfortunate. There are reasons, purposes for this, but relative to 100 years ago, the casualty rate is definitely lower. So this is where I want to end this video before I go into the next one, so you understand the shift I am making while I'm also doing the transition process where I am beginning to activate my 21 chakras, which is part of the whole journey I'm doing here. Because as you go into the soul level, you must adhere to the rules and the laws and the principles of the fifth kingdom, which I have given my version of in my pillar project material, which feels natural for me to adhere to. I don't need to battle this. I don't need to in any ways or forms do a fourth ray feeling of these laws and rules, because they make perfect sense to me, and I know what they are meant for, and I know it's to create the highest progression rate for all if we adhere to these laws and understand these laws. But it's not believing in the laws, it's not bowing to the laws, it is understanding the laws in their complexity and using the laws, because the rules and the laws and the principles are all about building in energy. That's what they are there for, similar to the physical laws of our world, the laws of atoms, the strong force, the weak force, gravity. All of these are laws of energy. And the same goes with the principles, even though you can say they are moral or ethical, but they are technically how to use specific psychological energy in a productive way that creates the highest standard energy in you. From where you can go into the rules of engagement, where you work with the energies and the genetic composition of the races, where you then transform into the natural laws of energy that then goes with the soul kingdom or the fifth kingdom, or the beyond our solar system limitations as they are right now. These are all different forms of energies and forces you learn to work with through the different laws and principles and rules. These are not to confine you, but they are actually there by your work with them, your understanding of them, the love and wisdom used in the correct way will develop the energy system you need to progress with to be able to do the transition, whether you use my version of them or you use someone else's version of it. It's all up to you, but it's just so you understand what laws and rules actually are. They are different methods to work with energy and forces are always what you create, and energy is always what's in your surroundings. Thank you.